Hello, welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, Wednesday, October 16th, 2019. My name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore, and this is my weekly series of informal video chats where I talk about some subject that I want to talk about or that others suggest for me to talk about. Today I'm coming to you from Regis University. Let me just check and make sure I'm broadcasting. It says I am. Good. Here we go. Monday was a holiday, and so today, Wednesday, I am doing my makeup lessons, and so I'm trying to find a spot. My usual place where I would be on Wednesdays isn't happening right now, but that's okay. Originally I was thinking I was going to just be talking about MuseScore 3.3 today, but there's for a couple of good reasons we haven't quite released it yet, and one of the things that has to do with this has to do with these new palettes. And so I want to talk about palettes today as one of the topics, the main topic I'm interested in. I'm always happy to answer questions. People who are watching live on YouTube, feel free to jump in and ask questions on the chat. But what I want to talk about are the palettes, because with MuseScore 3.3, it's going to be very easy to customize your palettes. And we really want to emphasize that this is not just a power user feature. It's something that we really think everyone can take advantage of and would love everyone to take advantage of so they can really improve their experience of using MuseScore. So let me make a switch over here to, well, actually, I should, switch again, sorry. I'm going to switch to the basic palette. Okay, so when you normally start MuseScore, so 3.3, as I said, isn't quite out yet, any day now. But it's already possible to customize your palettes, it's just harder. So I'm using a pre-release version of MuseScore 3.3 here, and I'm using the default basic workspace, which is in MuseScore 3.2, which is what most of you have. That control is down here, the lower left, not up here at the upper right. But it's the same basic control. And the workspaces that we provided in the past were the basic and the advanced. The basic is quite basic. So these are the only clefs you have. There's a reasonable smattering of time signatures. Articulations, a very small set of articulations, right? The lines palette has got a fair amount of stuff on it. Bar lines palette, fair amount of stuff. So you can see kind of the basic palette what it has, but MuseScore has much, much, much more than this. So we've always provided the advanced workspace also, and you could switch between them. And one thing you can see here is now there's more of them, like this breaths and pauses palette wasn't even on the basic workspace. What else? So clefs, oh my gosh, remember there were just those 4? Now we've got all these additional variations on the treble and bass clef and all these additional C clefs and things. If you go to the time signatures palette, I think that might be more or less just the same, but let's look at the articulations palette. Remember that only had like half a dozen things on it, and now it's got like 30 or more. So for a lot of people's purposes, the basic palette is too little, the advanced palette is too much, and sometimes it's not even just a question of how much, because maybe most of us don't use more symbols than are on that basic palette, but those aren't the symbols we use, right? I mean, maybe your idea of a basic palette, you wouldn't use any articulations, but you would use fret diagrams, or you would use, whatever else. So there's all sorts of things that different people use differently. And what we are trying to do is make it easy for people to customize their own palettes, but also we want to provide reasonable defaults and maybe a couple of, either as downloads or built into the program, other choices that you can select. If nothing else, other choices to select that you can download or that you can share your workspaces. So this is really what I want to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about how I use MuseScore, which I realize is changing with MuseScore 3.3 and the ease with which you can customize palettes. Excuse me, need some water. So I typically always used the advanced workspace. And I typically, the advanced workspace has essentially everything on it that MuseScore supports. I should mention there's the symbols palette, which is separate. If I press Z, it displays this symbols palette. This has just tons and tons and tons of additional symbols. These symbols, though, are all just what I would call graphical. In other words, they show up in your score, but MuseScore doesn't understand them in the least. I mean, these are tremolo symbols. MuseScore understands tremolos, but not if you add them from the symbols palette, only if you add them from the actual tremolos palette. The symbol, and a lot of these symbols, though, like what is this thing? Vibrato, pulse, accent, Saunders, first stem. Well, there you go. This is not a symbol that MuseScore has any native understanding of. So the symbols on this palette, if you add them to your score, MuseScore won't understand them. So it won't know how to position them exactly. It won't know how to play them back or anything. But at least you can get your score to show them. If you want tremolo, you would normally use the tremolo palette, not the symbols palette. But the symbols palette has all these additional symbols. So, other than the things on the symbols palette, the advanced palette, the advanced workspace, workspace is the collection, the whole collection of palettes and a few other settings. So the advanced workspace has all the symbols for which MuseScore understands, practically. The one thing it's missing is the bagpipe embellishments palette. That used to be there, but we took it off because we realized hardly anyone uses it. So it's now available just to add. If you want. In MuseScore 3.3, just hit the Add Palettes, and boom, now I can have the bagpipe embellishments as well as the accordion palette that can be added. So, but the advanced workspace had essentially everything else. For my purposes, though, this worked for me, and I didn't bother to customize it because it was too much of a pain. I just lived with the fact that anytime I opened up the articulations palette, it has a ton of symbols that I've never in my life used. I've never used most of these symbols in here. I've never used most of these fermatas. I just use the basic one. I use these articulations here quite a lot, and I've used the bowing markings and a couple of the guitar markings here. But pretty much everything between here and here, I really don't use. So starting in MuseScore 3.3, if you don't want it, boom, they're gone, right? Now, are they really gone? No. If I press more, there they are. They're all ready to be added back. So I can just drag them back into my palette. Or if I'm tired of dragging them individually, I just want to reset the whole palette, I can reset the palette. And there they all are back again. So this More button is going to be a big thing now in the palettes where you can access the things that aren't there by default. So the advanced palette does basically have everything by default. But let's go back to basic. I used to think of the basic palette as not being very useful, the basic workspace, because it just didn't have enough stuff for me, and so I would always switch to advanced. But maybe it's okay now. Maybe the fact that it doesn't have all the articulations I need is all right. Maybe if I ever need this articulation, I can just add it by pressing more. Maybe I don't need to take up all that space in my palette, and I'm happy to just add more and then drag it onto my score directly from there. Maybe I didn't need it. Or if I decide, you know what, this basic palette is fine except it doesn't have this guy, I could just add it. And now it's there, right? So that's a possibility also. So you can customize these things by either adding things to a smaller palette or deleting them from a larger palette. Also, the order of the palettes. It was possible previously to customize it, but now it's much easier. If I decide, like some people talk about wanting their palettes alphabetical. To me, I wouldn't want that because clefs, key, and time signatures, to me, these logically go together, but they're nowhere near each other in the alphabet. But maybe I'll alphabetize after that, okay? So accidentals, articulations, I guess bar line should come next. See, I can just drag these around now. The process of customizing your order of palettes before was too painful. No one would want to actually do that. So repeats in a matter of seconds. Breaks, oops, that's after bar lines, and beams. There we go. I'm alphabetized. So there you go. You can have that if you want it now, easily. But I guess the question is, we used to have this basic and advanced, and the basic was there to not overwhelm people. And then when you first started MuseScore, it asked what you wanted. But of course, you didn't know what you wanted because you really hadn't seen the options yet the first time you ever start MuseScore. Good. I'm glad you find that cool. I do too. So we had the basic there, and that was the default if you didn't change it when you first started MuseScore. And the idea was to not overwhelm people with too much stuff. But what ends up happening is people didn't realize there's other clefs because it wasn't obvious enough how to add more clefs or how to switch workspaces or anything. Now, the mere fact that it says more right there, it's really clear that, oh, there must be more clefs. Oh my gosh, look at all those clefs. And then you can either add them directly to your score or, as I said, add them to your palette just by dragging them in. So you can do that, or you can just delete it again. So we're trying to decide now, well, does it still make sense to even have two different workspaces, a basic and an advanced? Because we had those because it was so hard to customize them. We wanted to have one that was not overwhelming and one that was pretty full. But we now think no one's going to want either of those. They're going to want their customized one. Do we want to start with one that's kind of basic and add to it? Or do you want to start with one that's kind of full and then remove things from it? I don't know. I think different people might feel differently about that. I think my mindset, because I'm used to the advanced one, was I was going to want to start with advanced and then remove things from it. But I don't know, maybe people really would be happier starting with something like basic and then adding things to it. And maybe what we have under basic is still too much. I mean, maybe people don't need to see that many time signatures under basic. Maybe they just need to see 3 and then see a more button and are happy with it that way. I don't know. I'm welcoming feedback. So if there's people who are watching live, by all means, feel free to participate in the chat and let me know. But also, those of you who are not watching live, who are watching later, or who just don't maybe feel like using the chat, leave a comment here. Or go to the MuseScore.org, the support forum, or the development forum, and no, just leave the comments here or wherever, Facebook, you can do it. Anywhere you think that we're going to see it. Well, we would love to know what you think makes sense, but bear in mind that until you really use this system, it's going to be hard to know. Like I said, I thought I was going to really like an advanced palette with just a few things missing, but I'm actually finding I like it sparser than I thought I would, and I don't mind accessing the more button or adding things that way. So yeah, but that's start with them all blank. Now there's a thought. Start with them blank and then you only add things as you need. That's an interesting thought. So that's certainly a possibility. And yeah, there's so many possibilities, and it's really a fascinating subject to think about because people think differently, they work differently, and I don't know. But let me show you something that I have put together as a proposed default. And okay, so I will admit fully that this is a proposed default for people who think like me. What this is it's basically starting from advanced and removing a bunch of things. So just by hitting the add palettes button, you can see what I removed. Well, the accordion and bagpipe are gone, but I also removed the noteheads palette. I never use it personally, and everything that's on that palette you can already do from the inspector, so it feels like something I don't need. Now, breaks and spacers and frames and measures, if people use MuseScore a lot, you might be looking at those and go, oh my God, of course you need those. But what I've done is I've decided I get confused. I can't remember which is on which palette, and I tend to use them together anyhow, so I've just created a new palette I call Page Layout, and it's got all those things. It's got my breaks, my spacers, and my frames on it. I don't have that silly add measure icon because that's in the menu and there's a shortcut for it. But I did take the staff type change element that was on the text palette and move this into my page layout palette. So I've got this page layout palette that's got all the stuff that relates to page layout on it. So yeah, so the idea that it's good to force a user to use the new feature is definitely one of the lines of thinking within the development team. But another line of thinking is we want to make things as easy as possible for new users, and maybe they don't want to have to spend the time learning to do that. so maybe so yeah, it already is the case that when you create your custom palette, it does save this. It's not in a place, there's no like command to save it to a file that you could then look at directly, but it is there. So let me actually show you where it is. If I come to, this is Windows, you can probably tell that. If you go to, where the heck is, see, I have to think about where it is, but I'll show you. See, users, Marc, app data, you have to be showing hidden files, local, bear with me, MuseScore, MuseScore 3, workspaces, aha. Here's my workspace file. So here's the one we're looking at right now, proposed default. So you can eventually find that thing, and then you can upload it and then download it and then just install it into MuseScore by dragging it into the window. So it is possible. It's not like dead simple yet, but maybe that feature might be coming, right? And it's also, we have a very easy a system called the extension facility, which those of you who have used MDL have seen that. That allows you to, allows us, the developers, to package up a workspace and other customizations, sound fonts, and I think plugins aren't part of it, but it can have the workspace, it can have sound fonts, it can have menu customizations and a handful of other things, and then package that up as an extension that you can just download from the help menu. So yeah, we make it easy to install the things, but not so easy to create these or to share the packages. But just go to this folder here and you can. So let me go to my window here, and oh, that's not the one I meant. Yes, it is. So this is the folder where the thing lives. Let me pop out my chat so I'm not overwhelming us with all the other stuff on this page. Okay, so that's where, so yeah, the idea of having an all that has everything, that's definitely strongly considered, and we probably will continue to have that. I mean, advanced is practically that now, but there's a few things missing, and so we might just have that, might just go ahead and put them all there now that it's so easy to remove things you don't want. But anyhow, let me walk through a little bit of my thinking here. So my thinking here is what I have at the top: brackets, clefs, key signatures, time signature. It's actually a little too easy to rearrange things now. You have to be a little careful. But the things at the top here are things that I do when I first create my score, right? When you first create your score, you're getting your clef set up, your key signatures, your time signatures, and bracketing staves. So I have all that towards the top, and then after that, I can kind of ignore the top, unless, of course, for key and time signature changes. But when I change key and time signatures, there's a pretty good chance that I'm also dealing with bar lines around the same time. So I've got kind of that up here as well. The exact ordering of these is questionable, but the idea that these are all kind of big picture things, and my page layout stuff are the big picture things I kind of deal with together. So I've kind of grouped them together. Then I've got some things that have to do with entering notes. Like while you're entering the notes themselves, you might need to deal with the beaming, you might be entering grace notes, you might be entering custom accidentals. Now I'm questioning whether I actually, like my accidentals palette, I took off all the microtonal ones. If you look at more, the original advanced palette had at least some of these, not all of them. But it had some of these microtonal ones. It had things like the natural flat, natural sharp. I never used those, so I took them off my own. They're there. But I debate whether I even need an accidentals palette, because they're all, well, look at that. They're not all here. That's because I switched to the basic workspace. Look at that. I need to switch to the advanced workspace to get those icons back, then switch to my proposed default, because my proposed default doesn't have the toolbar configuration. It's really just about the palettes. So yeah, anything that we do, I'm sure tutorials will deal it. You need to find a way to force them to change palettes so they know. Yeah, I mean, I would love it if the tour facility we have was interactive, that let you interact and it could tell you, yes, you're doing this right. But unfortunately, we don't have that feature in there. We just, that's not something that the tour feature has. But it is definitely something that I would love to see, a really interactive tutorial where you are really led to do things and kind of forced to do them and get some feedback on them. So anyhow, that is a good idea, and I do agree, but it's not something we have in place right now. So anyhow, so these are things having to do with entering notes. So all the accidentals are that I care about anyhow are there on the toolbar. So do I really need them here? Well, I guess I have the parentheses thing, but there's a shortcut for that, by the way. I think just the parentheses. Yeah, I press Shift 9, which is that, and that enters that already. So I don't need the palette for this, but somehow I feel like it doesn't hurt to just have that palette there. I don't know. I realize that's inconsistent when I said note heads, that I took that off because I never use it. But we use accidentals all the time, right? You just might use the toolbar. But we don't change note heads all the time. So do we really need two different places to do something we don't even do very often? That was my thinking in removing note heads palette by default. So anyhow, these are the things having to do with the notes themselves. Now these are things having to do with symbols that we would add to notes, articulations, ornaments, tremolo. Now arpeggios now and breaths, we're starting to get things that kind of connect notes, that have to do with multiple notes. Notice lines also could have been here. I decided to move them up higher. Why? No good reason. To be honest, I would be just as happy to have my lines palette down here. I think it used to be next to bar lines, and somehow that felt good. There's something structural about, I'll tell you what. The lines palette has on it things like the endings, and so that kind of to me goes with the repeats and so forth. Oh, the repeats used to be duplicated on both the repeats palette and the bar lines palette. For my purposes, I don't need it on both. I'm more used to them being on the bar lines palette because that's where they were before we decided to duplicate them, so that's what mine looks like. So anyhow, all the things having to do with the markings, the individual like symbols and things we add to scores are the next kind of grouping of palettes. And then finally we have all the text palettes towards the bottom. Text, tempo, dynamics, and fingering. And at the very bottom I have, did I remove my, no, wait a minute. I thought I had, it's probably hidden by my taskbar. Yeah, fretboard diagrams. I put it at the bottom just because I didn't know where else to put it. I like it out of the way, but maybe I'm better off putting it somewhere around here. Maybe this feels a little better to me. I made those couple little changes. So for my way of working, I feel like this kind of works for me in that while I'm working on the big picture structural stuff, I'm in the top area of the palette. While I'm working on entering notes, I'm in this area. While I'm working on additional symbols, I'm here. While I'm working on text, I'm over here. Now, the reality is I don't necessarily work that way, right? I work left to right and kind of get everything all at once. So maybe this makes no sense at all. Maybe it doesn't. But there's still something logical about it. I think that'll help me find it. The alphabet doesn't work for me because I don't think of what the palette is called. I think about what it does more than what it's called. That's one reason it doesn't work for me. So audio isn't as good. Yeah. So the deal is I did mention I'm at the school where I teach in a place where I'm not normally because today's sort of a special day. Monday was a holiday, and so we've shifted around the schedule. So anyhow, long story short, sorry, I'm not in one of the places I would normally be because the places I would normally be aren't available right now. So that's unfortunate. Would it help if I turned up the microphone? Or I bet that wouldn't help. I'm going to bet that doesn't help. But I'm going to just turn it up. Now it's already actually maximized. So I'm just going to just apologize again for the fact that it's not as good. Okay, so I'll tell you what, the guy who really did most of the design, Martin, goes by the nickname Tantacruel. He has this very famous video, a series of videos, one kind of critiquing Sibelius and one critiquing MuseScore from a user interface perspective. And he's the one who redesigned how the palette system would work, how the customization would work. And he's also been giving input on what he thinks a reasonable default palette would be, but everyone's got different ideas on this, so we're still not sure what this is going to look like. You saw that? Oh, you saw that video? Yeah, it's a popular, it's a great video. I mean, it's humorous in its just brutality of his criticisms, but in a humorous way, so he gets away with it. So we're not sure what this default palette exactly is going to look like when we release 3.3, because we're going to release 3.3 very soon, within days, I think, and we're not sure what it's going to look like. So, what was my point? Oh yeah, so his idea is he doesn't even care about all of these palettes. He wants his own palette. So let's do this. I'm gonna try this because I've never really tried this. I'm just gonna create a custom palette, and I think it goes at the top. You can also right-click somewhere and just insert new palette, and it will insert it right there. But so I've created my custom palette, and it's just called custom by default, but I can, rename it whatever I want in palette properties, call it Marc or whatever. I think I'm just going to call it custom for now. I can then put anything I want in here by either dragging it from another palette or Control-Shift drag to add something from my score. Like if I've got a particular piece of text that I use a lot, like G major in a box, well, Control-Shift drag, and now G major is there in my palette. Right, so I can and that's not new, but again, it's easier now. I didn't have to create a custom workspace and enable editing and all this other business you have to do. I actually don't want that. Oh, if you delete so remember when I deleted some of the other things from the palette, it just went away because more would bring it back. And it knew, well, you're not going to delete. You can't delete any of the predefined stuff. But this stuff that you add yourself, you could possibly completely delete it from the palette, so it doesn't even show up under more. So that's what it's going to ask. If I put it under hide, now it's still there under more. Here we go. So you can see it there. If I had picked delete, then now I can trash it entirely. And now it's delete that cell. Yes, I do. It's gone. All right. So you have all that kind of customization there. But so there's some particular text elements, some particular symbols that I might try to add that way. But I'm also curious, there's a lot of things that I do. Like here you can see I'm working on handouts and exercises. This is an exercise for my online theory class that I'm creating, that every once in a while you've heard me mention, and I'll be talking much more about soon when it's close enough to done that I can really show it off. But let me show you one of the handouts then. Okay, these are all the exercises. Let's find a handout. Well, even within just the realm of this, you can see, let me turn on some hidden things here. Well, let me just find one with already turned on. So you can see I'm using section breaks and I'm using frames quite a bit. So maybe I want to have those things. Section break. Is it going to move it? Nope, it copied it. Good, that's what I wanted. Section breaks and text frames. What else do I use a lot? So I can also take that text frame and go into its properties and scale it down. Say I only want it 66% size. Oops, did I do that wrong? Oh, that's 6, no, 60.66. That's a little better. Well, apparently I'm not doing that right, so I'm not going to worry about it, or that's a bug. But I have actually dealt with the scales before, and it's worked. Insert text frame, so I don't know what's up. Anyhow, what else do I use when I'm in this mode of creating these worksheets? I'm often creating text, and then I'll create staff text, but whoops, I must have caps lock on. Annotation. So I'll create something that's an annotation. I've already created an annotation text style for myself that makes it red and with a yellow background. That's part of the template. I created a template for these handouts and worksheets. Well, this now, staff text that has that text style, let's bring that into my palette because I use that a bunch. So in the palette, it's not going to show up with the fancy formatting because this formatting is really attached to this document, that text style, that it's user 6. That text style is not going to be available in other documents, but that's okay. It still should be the case that if I add it here, it's going to take that text style. It just won't, if I add that to some other document, it won't necessarily have, like if I just go to my default document here and add it, it won't still be yellow and red. It's just going to have the user 6 text style. But that's okay. I'm only going to use this annotation while I'm in one of my things. Now, if I wanted it to show up yellow, and you know what? Let me talk through this because this feels like it's something that I want to figure out, and I don't want to just wave my hands around this. So what did I do? Where did I add that dang thing? It must be here. I see the star. What's going on is because it's not customized, because this is just using the style setting, it doesn't add it to the palette. But I think if I customized the color, so if I forced it to be just ever so slightly different, so now it's no longer exactly what's there. I think now if I add this to the palette, that shows up. There you go. And if I similarly, let's just delete that guy. Let's delete this guy too, now that I know that I'm not going to use it. If I come in here and also change my highlight color to be just, in fact, I don't even have to change it. I just have to act like I'm going to change it. Nope, I guess I have to actually change it. Well, I think because I'm really silly about this, I'm going to change it. And now you can see that these buttons, the reset and the set as style, have activated because it's not at the default for that text style. I think now, even if I set it back, it's still, well, let me reset it. What happened? I didn't pay attention. I changed it from 60 to 61. And that caused it to do this. But when I came back to it, it's back to 60. You know what? I don't know why. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to trust that's okay. But I am going to come back here, and this guy reset to 0 also. Look at that. 0. So I don't know if that changed the actual HTML there. I should pay more attention next time. But if I add this guy to my custom palette, well, it looks like the background, the red showed up, but the custom background did not. Let me change it a little more. This is definitely different, BE. Now let me try adding this guy. Nope, it's just not going to show up with the background. So I guess that's just the way it is. No, that's the different Martin, I can tell you that. Martin Keary, K-E-A-R-Y, is Tentacruel. Use it to add my choir logo. Yeah. So you can add graphics if you've got like a graphic that you've used. Oh, by the way, so let's take a look at that. If I use the camera tool here, I can take a little picture of something, and let's pretend that this is your logo. Of course, this is no one's logo, but I will just take this thing and then Control-C to copy, and now I can click somewhere else and Control-V to paste, and I get that thing. It's smaller only because if I right-click my graphic, you'll see the resolution here I set to 180. I think if you set it to 360, it'll be actual life size, I think. But anyhow, now I can add this guy, whoops, take this guy, Control, Shift, drag. Well, that's interesting. I would have thought, so that didn't seem to work, but did it work is the question. The answer is it did work, it's just not shown in the palette. So I think there's an issue with the backgrounds in the palettes not working the way I might want them to. Not that this is my code. I wonder if I put in the draw staff option. That doesn't really change anything. Anyhow, so there you go. Adding images to the palette is apparently not working so hot, but I will bring that up with the powers that be. But it sort of works, they just don't display. I'm a little curious though, if I change workspaces. Bear with me here because we're getting ready to release, and I'll want to know if this is a real problem. Sometimes there's like a glitch where it doesn't show up at first, but then when you restart the palettes, it does show up. Nope. Okay. So anyhow, yeah, you can add these things to your palette. So maybe I want to create my custom palette that has the things that I'm doing all the time when I'm creating these worksheets, because these are the things that don't have keyboard shortcuts. Now, on the other hand, personally, when I think about it, maybe I'm just happier seeing, so I'm going to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and Section, select section, toggle section break. Look at that. There's the ability to define a shortcut. So maybe I just want to do that. Control Alt S. Yeah, I already know that I've defined Control Shift S to be split measure because I use that enough that I defined a shortcut for that. But Control Alt S for section break. Yeah. Actually, though, no, I'm going to take that back. Let me think about this. Enter by itself is a line break. Control Enter is a page break. I'd like it to be something involving Enter. Unfortunately, Shift Enter, it doesn't seem to be able to tell the difference between that and regular Enter. But what about Control Shift Enter? No. What about Alt Enter? Okay, that's not my section break. And then the other thing that I said was text frame. Text frame. Append text frame, insert text frame. This is the one I want. Shortcut for this. So text, I've already got all these different shortcuts for text. Control Shift is, so Shift, Control T is staff text, Control Shift T is system text, Control Alt T is tempo text. I think Shift Alt T is available. No, that's Alt. How about, oops, I need to clear this now. Control Alt T. Okay, that's now my add text frame. Am I going to remember these? Yeah, I will eventually. So now I could add those things through shortcuts, and maybe I don't care about the palettes. But there's plenty of symbols that you might want to add that you can't define shortcuts for. So anyhow, you can create your custom palette and just add all sorts of stuff, and it can be mixtures of layout stuff and text stuff and articulations and really whatever you want, images and things. So even if your palette order makes sense logically like this does, but doesn't really make sense because you're working left to right and you're entering time signatures and articulations and line breaks and things all at the same time, well, you can just take the ones you add the most and add them to a custom palette. So anyhow, that's what Martin is kind of advocating, or what he is thinking he's going to be doing himself with this new facility. So that is really showing you some of what's going on with this customization of palettes and what's possible. I'm going to undo these changes to this score because this is that enough? Yeah, that's actually too much. Actually, no, I'm just going to close it because I made some changes already that I want to not lose. So I'm just going to close it. I should have created a test score to mess with. Anyhow, yeah, that shows you a little bit about what the capabilities are, but more than that, it's also showing you something about the thought process behind customization of palettes. What I'm thinking about as I'm customizing palettes for my own use, what I'm thinking about as I propose what I think the default palette should be. And of course, I'm proposing a default palette for people like me. So this proposed default palette makes no sense for a lot of other people maybe, but it makes sense for me, so what the heck, I just proposed it. Just because it's proposed doesn't mean it's gonna win. I want you guys thinking about, well, what would you do once this palette customization facility is available? What are you guys going to do to customize your own? And what do you think you would want to start from? Because I don't want to say the decision hasn't been made or has been made, because I don't know that either of those are accurate. I just know that this is what we're dealing with right now as we're preparing to release MuseScore 3.3 is a final decision on what we're going to do for the default workspace. But the other thing I know is, okay, well, 3.3 comes out this way. There's going to be a 3.3.1. You know it, right? Every time there's ever an X.Y release, there's always an x.y.z release a couple weeks later because some things break and we fix them, right? That's already in planning. And so, yeah, I would expect there to be another release coming in a couple weeks to introduce whatever problems get found with the 3.3 release. So there'll be an opportunity to revisit this. So please, please think about this before 3.3 comes out if possible and comment, or even after it comes out, start playing with it, give it more thought, give us your feedback. I really, really want to know about this stuff. So what if I had a section in the MuseScore that let you watch the MuseScore Café? So that's not a bad idea. I don't have direct control, excuse me, over the MuseScore website. So I have my own website, masteringmusescore.com. So that's my website because the author of Mastering MuseScore, the book and the online course and so forth. So I do have a place on the Mastering MuseScore website where you can watch it. I'm actually in the process of revamping this because right now the Mastering MuseScore website is kind of split into two, and I think I'm going to rejoin this and make it all one site, and so I'd be watching for this. But anyhow, if you go to masteringmusescore.com, you will see a link. In fact, I'll show you what it looks like right now, but I suspect I'm going to change this within the next couple of weeks. But masteringmusescore.com, no, you don't need to see the WordPress administration screen. So if you come here, so the thing is though, when you go to a website to watch a YouTube video, you can watch it. I can embed it. So here's MuseScore Cafe. And here we are, current episode. And if I press play, we're going to see myself and hear all sorts of lovely feedback. There you go. So that's this, but you can't access the chat from the embed widget. You have to go to MuseScore. So then you'd have to go click the YouTube button to watch it on MuseScore if you want to chat anyhow. That's just a limitation of YouTube. They don't make the chat widget available from embedded widgets. So yeah, it is accessible on Mastering MuseScore. I have no ability to make it available, to embed it on MuseScore, the MuseScore website, but I'm trying to build the Mastering MuseScore website as the sort of place to go to learn about MuseScore, and so as I said, I'm kind of in the process of revamping how that's going to work. Anyhow, I think I've said all the things that I knew I wanted to say. If y'all have questions, feel free to keep asking while I talk about wrapping this up. So I look at this custom workspace and say, you know what, it's not that interesting to me right now, so I'm just going to delete it. There we go. But anyhow, that's something you can do, is create your custom workspace and just put whatever you want. So Tantacryl's got dynamics mixed with articulations, mixed with time signatures and things, but it's the stuff that he uses the most. I think that might be a useful thing for a lot of people. So what's coming up next? What's coming up next is 3.3. I promise it's coming soon. It's just a question of exactly when. 3.3 will come out, and then eventually there'll be a 3.3.1. There's no specific plans for what's coming next for MuseScore after that, other than we keep adding features, we keep fixing bugs. What's coming next for me and Mastering MuseScore? Well, I've mentioned this online course, this theory course, so you'll be hearing more about that because I'm continuing to develop it, and once I have enough kind of critical mass on that to really want to show it, I'm going to. I'm going to take that site and really try to refocus it, repurpose it a little bit, to try to make it a little more of like a one-stop shop, to make it really easy to access everything you need to know. Ideally, we would make this available directly from the help menu, so that from the help menu it'll take you right to masteringmusescore.com or to some page on musescore.org that's essentially the same thing. But I want there to be a one-stop shop that shows you how to get to everything, right? That shows you how to get to the handbook and to the cafe and to the online course and all the other stuff that exists to get help, the support forums, the reporting of bugs, and help people sort out, well, what's musescore.com versus musescore.org, because that's this whole source of confusion when people go there and try to ask questions. Musescore.com is where you share scores and access and where the mobile apps go to access scores. So MuseScore.com discussions are all about that, all about the score sharing and the mobile apps. MuseScore.org is the support site for the MuseScore software itself, the stuff that you are seeing me talk about every week. That's never very clear to a lot of people, that distinction in the website. So again, I want this sort of one-stop help center to be a thing. So that's something that's on my radar of something I want to put forth. Also, those of you who are educators or students, I'm doing a free webinar this Saturday. I should get that page up. If I go to school.masteringmusescore.p. Educational partnership, I think, is the link. The educational partnership is just this free thing you can just sign up for to get notified about educational resources that I make available specifically for the education community. And I'm doing a free webinar here, and all the information on that is you get it. So just if you click that become a partner, it doesn't cost anything. It just sort of is the place where you go to get all the information. So let me post that into the chat window. Free webinar on MuseScore in education. So I'm just going to talk about using MuseScore in an educational that's this Saturday, October 20th. The time, it's different, time zone wise, so you'll click the link and get it, but it's basically, I think, 1 o'clock Eastern. It's a little bit later than this cafe is. So that's coming up this weekend, will be this webinar that I'm going to do. Ideally 3.3 will be released by then. And then yeah, lots of other things to be talking about, and so I continue to welcome feedback on topics for future cafes. So I'm not seeing any other questions here right now, so I'm going to trust that I've answered anyone's questions let me just see if there's any in here that I didn't deal with. 3 options: basic, all, and custom. Basic, custom starts blank and lets you build. That's kind of interesting. That is an interesting idea. I like that. Yeah, so I'm going to peruse the comments here. I'm going to come back and check if people leave comments on the video itself once it's up, as opposed to in the chat, and then I'll sort of pass that along, and we'll just take this all into consideration as we decide what we're doing here. So hope you've all enjoyed this, and thanks for the feedback. And yeah, we'll see what I end up talking about next week. I mean, this was a lot about the palettes, and so in some sense I've already talked about 3.3, but there's more to it than just the palettes, and so I might want to review that to some extent. So I think I will get going. I got another lesson to teach. I will see you all next week. Have a great week. Talk to you later. Bye.